You grew up in a deeply musical family.
Mhm.
What's one memory from that time that really shaped your love for music? I think maybe we just start from a little bit of origin type story. What's one memory that you can remember?
Oh man, I feel like because both my parents are musicians, my grandparents are musicians, my twin brother is a musician. Um, so trying to think, earliest memories, probably my uh a fond memory, but also one that's kind of interesting is when I was 5 years old. I didn't really, my parents were very chill. They didn't like push me and my brother to do music. They just kind of had music available, and if we were interested in it, they would give us lessons and sign us up for programs. And then if we weren't into it anymore, they'd be like, "No problem, we'll put you in soccer or whatever." So
Right.
they weren't like you have to practice every day at all. They're like super lax about it. But when I was
Okay.
5, my brother broke his foot and my mom had to take him to the ER to get like his foot casted up and stuff. And that night, her and my dad had tickets to see Mozart's Requiem.
Okay.
And so I went to see it with my dad as like a 5 year old in place of my mom. And I just, it was like the first time I'd ever seen an orchestra, the first time I'd ever seen like classical music really. And I was just so obsessed with the flute player. Like I was like transfixed. I was just like staring at her the whole time, couldn't look away. And then my dad like rented me a flute because I kept talking about the flute. And I remember going downstairs before my parents woke up and I like opened this flute case and there's like a little like he bought me like a little book that showed you how to set it up and stuff and it had this blue velvet on the inside. And I just remember like that feeling of like, oh my God, this is like this very, very like transcendent thing that I'm like touching right now. And I set it up and I just like knew how to play it already as like a little girl. I wasn't like amazing. Obviously, I wasn't like playing crazy stuff, but I like woke my parents up playing a melody that I'd heard from the Mozart thing that I'd been so obsessed with that had just been in my ear. And my parents were like, what the hell? We have to put her in lessons like immediately. And then I ended up getting like, as like a 5 year old, like in grade 1, I got a scholarship to the Royal Conservatory of Music. And I took lessons with this woman named Diane Aitken, who is the daughter of like one of Canada's most famous classical flute soloists, Robert Aitken. And then so that was like just that feeling of like it was like in my blood, it was in my bones, like the flute. And then but then in grade 3, I was like, this isn't fun anymore. I'm over it. And my parents were like, no problem. And then I didn't pick it up again until 8th grade when I did it in band class again. But I now think of that and I think like, because when you're a kid, you kind of haven't fully formed all the ego and the limitations of your mind. You can kind of tune into your cosmic and ancestry and stuff. And flutes are like the oldest instrument second to drums and voice, right? Like
Wow, I didn't know that.
they have like yeah, they have like bones from 50,000 years ago that have little holes carved in them like flutes, right? So people have been playing like doing the action of like blowing and this kind of like the more fingers and holes you push down, the lower the note goes. That kind of like intuition of like just the mechanism of the flute is like deeply encoded in people's DNA. And that's why like I think a lot of spiritual music is with the flute. Like we hear like Indian spiritual music or Native American spiritual music. It's like these ancient sounds that like activate some deep remembrance in our just our code, you know what I mean? Because we've been hearing
Right.
the sound of a flute for tens of thousands of years, probably even longer. They just disintegrated over time, right? Because they're probably made of
Right.
wood and reeds and bamboo and stuff. So
Right.
that's my that's my fondest, earliest memory of music, I'd say.
That's so fascinating. So we're gonna jump ahead just a little bit, but at what point? I know there's a lot of ground we're missing now, but we're gonna come back to it. But at what point did it feel like this wasn't just a love that that you needed to actually do this stuff, like you needed to actually start recording music and taking all of the skills that you built in between that first discovery, and actually living this out.
Yeah, I feel like it's because I went to university for jazz saxophone. So kind of
Right.
as like a extension of my journey with the flute. So when I started playing flute again in like eighth grade, and then I started high school, and then I went to my high school music class, and I was like bored because I was playing flute in it, but I could already play the flute like pretty well. So I was like, this is kind of boring for me. We're playing like hot cross buns, and people next to me can really get a sound out of their flute. Like I'm kind of not being challenged enough. And so I went to my music teacher and I was like, can I learn a different instrument? Like, and he was like, okay, we don't have any tenor saxophone players in the class, so you can play tenor saxophone. And I became obsessed with the tenor saxophone. And so I went to university for tenor saxophone and then played a little bit of flute, like in tandem with that because it's a woodwind. But I like learned kind of the foundations of producing at Humber College, which is where I went to like for my jazz degree. But I was very much focused on jazz and practicing jazz and being like a session saxophone player. And so all the production classes were kind of just what I had to take as part of the thing. I didn't like really fully deep dive into production while I was there, but that kind of like laid the foundation, I think, of just being in a music studio and like taking my, and then also as your fourth year project, you have to make an EP. So you have to like produce
Yeah.
your own kind of record, but it was only a few songs. Um, but I was at the time just really like, my EP is to showcase how good at saxophone I am. It wasn't like this grand opus kind of creative thing. And then, but then after I finished college, I ended up going on the road for a year as like a backup singer with a pop singer. And that was very different than anything I'd done in just like playing jazz and playing gigs. And it kind of just opened my world up a bit to just realizing like I'm not limited to just being a jazz saxophone player. Like, and I was meeting all these different artists and surrounded by all these people, and I started writing songs that had lyrics in it, which uh, took me a while to kind of get over my shyness about, but everybody in my family is a songwriter, so it was only a matter of time. Like my mom, my dad, and my brother are all very prolific, amazing songwriters. So it wasn't like that was like out of left field or something. That was just, but I was always used to hiding behind these instruments and like kind of like with math, like there are right notes to play in jazz. You know what I mean? Like there's right, you can get it right. Whereas if you're doing like creative writing, it's a little more nuanced and subjective and it's like harder to like get the gold star or whatever. So I feel like in school, I always kind of gravitated towards things that I could just like practice and know for sure I'd be good at. Um,
Right.
but then after that tour, I like ended up quitting because I didn't really like pop and touring and all that. But I I feel like that kind of just opened my eyes to like I can kind of do whatever I want. Like I don't just have to play saxophone. I don't just have to sing. I don't just have to write one kind of genre. I don't have to. I can just be me and all the sounds and the vast cosmic like landscape inside my mind. I can try to like birth it into material existence. And so I feel like that kind of just it was kind of later in my mid 20s when I kind of realized like oh like all of this stuff in my brain, not just the saxophone melodies through it, but like the whole landscape is something I want to try to like get out and move through me. So I feel like it was yeah, it was kind of an amalgamation of a lot of different paths that all led to this kind of like joint garden or something to keep the
Yeah, for
metaphor.
sure,
Yeah.
for sure. No, it feels like there's so much musicianship, and I think that maybe harkens back to your family. So maybe I'll just ask you a follow up question before we move on here. When you say your mom and your dad and your brother, they write music? Are we talking about the composition itself, or the lyric, or both?
Both. And so a few, my mom doesn't have anything on the internet. She's got a few things recorded, but she is always playing music and writing music. She's a little more low key, but my dad and my brother both have music online. And
Okay.
my dad like was always writing songs. He did this thing when I was like in middle school where he did this like internet blog thing, like in the early days of blogging, where he wrote a song every week for a year, and then like people would like
Right.
comment on it, and he did 52 songs in a year, and it was like, and then he ended up like making a friend through that like when I went to LA years later, I like stayed with his friend from like his internet blog, and he like lent me his car, and like it was like this whole thing. So it's kind of cool, like just when you put your art out there, like it kind of opens the world up for you. But if
Yeah,
you
for
check
sure.
out my dad's stuff on Bandcamp, his name is Alec Steinwall, and then my brother is Jackson Steinwall. They have tons of music
Okay.
online, and it's kind of, my dad's stuff is kind of like orchestral, like ballad folk, like song, just like, but yeah, like my dad's a full time musician. He does like piano bar stuff for, he does like dueling pianos and piano bar gigs, and that's what he's always done my whole life. And my brother's a full time musician, and I'm a full time musician. So I've lived in Toronto my whole life, so I've kind of had just lots of, I play whatever genre, I play lots of different things. So it's kind of and I feel like that's the same for my whole family. So we're all just always playing. Sometimes it's instrumental, but sometimes there's lyrics. But my dad's actually writing a book right now. He's really into like writing. He's kind of like a polymath, interesting guy. But he's like
Right.
been writing a novel for, not a novel. It's like a nonfiction book about consciousness and stuff. But he's been writing it for a long time, and so I feel like writing and words are very, also very as important in my upbringing. As a kid, like all I did was read. I was one of those like kind of quiet, just obsessed with books kids that was just like always reading under my desk or whatever, you know what I mean? So I feel like I've always loved words and loved, that's kind of why I also started songwriting instead of just playing jazz, was because I kind of, as I got older, was like, I have more to say. Like I have specific things I want to say that like I can allude to them with instrumental music and like kind of give the impression of the feeling I'm trying to get, but I want to like actually say this with words. You know
Right.
what I mean? So
Right. Yeah.
yeah, but so that's my long answer to your question. But
No,
yeah.
so impressive. So you just spoke about Toronto. Take me through what Toronto has meant to you as an artist. And again, I am careful here because your sound is very much unlike anything I've heard before. But if there's any bearing of the city on how your music has shaped out, I want you to make that connection for me.
Oh man, I feel like Toronto, the thing that I love about it and the thing that I will never get tired of, because I don't know if
Right.
I'd ever want to, if I move out of the city, it'll be to like have a farm or something. If I, it won't be to go to another city, because
Right.
Toronto is so diverse in terms of like not just ethnicities and cultures, but also musically, right? Like you have an incredible punk rock scene here. You have an incredible hip hop, neo soul, jazz scene here. You have an incredible like Latin music scene here from South America, and you have an incredible like, you know, the same rock bands that have been playing on Queen Street since the 80s. You get that still. You have like, you know, it's where all the pop stuff in Canada happens. It's where all the jazz stuff in Canada happens. It's where all, so I feel like there's just so many amazing, strong scenes here. You know what I mean? And that's kind of
Yeah,
maybe
for sure.
speaks to the eclecticness and of my sound as an artist, because it kind of does feel like there's no limit here. Like that's what I've loved about Toronto. I always say I love living, being born in Toronto in the time I was born, which I was born in the mid 90s. And so I grew up
Right.
in like the 2000s. I was a teenager in the 2010s. Like, and I've always just felt like I could literally be anything I wanted to be. You know what I mean? Like I
Hmm.
could just, there's no like norm here. Everybody's just doing their thing. They're from somewhere else. They speak a different language. They look different. They dress different. They're gay. They're straight. They're whatever. You know what I mean? Like, and anybody, anything goes and everybody gets along. And so I feel like as like an individual kind of growing up in that, it kind of just gave me this like, yeah, like sky's the limit. There are no like my least favorite thing is having to put a genre on my music. Like I always get so sick of it.
Right.
People are always like, how would you give us a 50-word description of your music? And I'm like, I literally can't.
You
Like,
can't.
you want
You
a
can't.
50 chapter book? Because that'll sum it up. But like, I can't sum it up in a blurb. You know what I mean? I can't sum it up in a genre. I would just put alternative as my genre because I'm just like, I don't even know what you'd call this because I have jazz records I've listened to 500 times, and I have 60s folk records I've listened to 500 times, and I've listened to Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd 500 times, and I've listened to Feist 500 times, and I've listened to, you know what
Right.
I mean? Like, there's
Right.
no like one vibe that I am limited by or feel like specifically strongly about. Like, I just like everything and anything goes. So I feel like Toronto, yeah, it's like this melting pot of everything, and you can kind of just be who you want to be here. It's really cool.
Okay. I love your energy. So you spoke about so those years where you gigged and you maybe were on the road. What did they do for you? I know you kind of left it at some point because you just mentioned that. But what did those years do for you in terms of what you now do? Were there anything you picked up from those years that you're holding on to still?
Well, I still gig. I still do for my
Okay.
for most of my income. I do like
Right.
mostly like wedding gigs, and it's kind of the same idea where like it just taught me how to play a bunch of different styles of music. Like now I get hired for gigs as a saxophone player. I get hired for gigs
Right.
as a backup singer. I get hired for gigs as a guitar player. I get hired. Usually my main thing now is like auxiliary utilities person. So I'll play like percussion on one song and take the sax solo on one song and acoustic guitar on one song and sing backups for 3 songs and play the shaker and another saxophone solo.
Right.
Like I'm kind of just like doing whatever, but
Right.
but I think it taught me like musicality. It taught me like where I can just drop in on a song and take a saxophone solo. I don't even need to know the chords. I don't like. It taught me how to just kind of communicate and think and be in the language of music. Um, and it taught me, yeah, just like a lot of different sounds, I think, and working with different
Uh huh.
people and meeting different people. Each
Right.
person has their own unique sound, even if you're playing with. I play the same songs in every wedding band that I play in, but it's always a bit of a different energy and vibe, and yeah, it's just I think it just taught me how to play instruments and taught me how to listen. I have that tattooed on my hand to remember to listen. But
Remember to listen. Is that what it
yeah,
says?
it just says listen, but
Okay. Oh, gotcha. Gotcha. No, it's a good skill to have.
yeah,
So I read that in 2017, like you kind of became like you shifted gears and kind of became a band leader. Is that correct?
yeah.
Okay. So what was that transition like, and what would you say as the difference, kind of like coordinating people and being in charge of that process of band leading?
Oh man, it's hard. It's a struggle, especially it's something. I mean, ideally, I did do band leading before because I ran like a little cocktail band. So I did like events and I had like a little it was called Nightingale Music Company right out of college. And so I would hire like little like jazz or little just background music for fancy parties kind of. It wasn't always jazz, sometimes it was just more like kind of smooth whatever, but it was it was a lot of like administration and coordinating and stuff because I was hiring people, and I always, as a saxophone player, you always need a band, or at least a piano player, a guitar player to accompany you. Nobody's only, I've only done a handful of just me gigs on saxophone, like sometimes I get hired to play with a DJ, but they're not my favorite gigs because it's usually just I'm a prop and I like walk around the party with a wireless saxophone and the DJ's playing and I like play along. It's kind of, but so it's not like I was that new to coordinating people. But then the main difficulty in the change was that it was coordinating people now to play music that I was very vulnerable and sensitive about. And so when things happen like, oh, one of the band members is like not responding to my messages or not filling out the little like calendar to figure out when we're going to rehearse, or they're like bailing on things, or then instead of me just being able to be like, oh, no problem, you're busy, I'll get someone else to play bass on this little gig, it's like, oh, like, oh, that hurts my ego and my heart, and it makes me wonder if my music's bad and that's why it's not a priority to you. And so I think there's just a lot of, I find the biggest struggle being like an artist rather than like a gigging musician now, that like it's so much more about like me and my story and my soul and my like inner music coming out, and I have to work with a team to kind of like manifest it in physical form. But it's just kind of getting over all those like insecurities and vulnerabilities and emotions when you're also trying to do business and coordinating and promoting and all these things that are like just easier to do if you can have a neutral, unattached relationship with the product you're trying to create. You know what I mean? So
Right,
I think
right,
that's the biggest struggle, is like not taking things personally. Like if people are like flaky or they sub out of your show, it's not because you suck and your music sucks and they don't want to do it. It's because they have a life that is their own. You know what I mean? So it's
right.
it's uh it's definitely a challenge. And then just now I'm at this point where like I wish I could pay my band for every gig that we do, but we do a lot of like door split gigs, and so because I don't really have, because I do everything indie, I don't really have enough resources to like guarantee pay and guarantee like a tour or something. So I can't be any of my bandmates like first priority because they got to go be with artists who are giving them like 3 months of paid gigs and stuff. And
Right,
so
right.
just even getting everybody I want to play with in the same room is a challenge, because I am so blessed that I play with such highly sought after musicians that everybody wants to play with because they're so amazing and so talented. And but it just makes coordinating and doing those kind of more admin things a little harder. But yeah, anyways.
No, it's so I think we should touch upon this idea of maybe sustainability when it comes to bringing in the dollars. I think we're gonna do that further at the end of the show, but I want us to get into welcome to the garden. So unbelievable to it's remarkable what you have done on that album. So it does have a wow type spiritual side to it, and even the artwork, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the artwork kind of reflects what's going on in the music. So I want you to tell me, I know you can't really, but tell me how, what is the album, you used the word earlier about cosmic. That's what it
Mm.
feels like. It feels like
Hmm.
something I would play, something that a Martian would be listening to.
That's it. I love that. I take that as a compliment. So, um, yeah, I Welcome to the Garden was a kind of the title track is like my opus to the earth. I was going through like a very big spiritual awakening in the period that I was writing all that music, and the whole album is kind of like a concept album of like the journey through life to love, and like all the different ways we experience love. my hero in life and music, like even as a saxophone player, but even just as an artist and as a person, is John Coltrane, because his whole artist statement, and like he never got stuck as an artist. He was always evolving. If you look at like his albums year to year to year to year, like he's doing something different. He was pushing, 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 striving is the word he used for. Like you gotta be striving. You gotta be like going forward. And he had this like urgency to keep pushing. But his whole thing was making music to help humanity the vibration of human consciousness ascend closer and closer to love and closer to this vibration of universal love, which is like that cosmic force you're talking about, like that kind of feeling. And so like I take that as he's like my hero, because that's what I also want to do, is like I want to create things that, he was literally creating like geometric matrices with his harmonic patterns that were like creating like sacred geometry, like pyramids to like the giant steps matrix is like to harmonically like create a Merkaba, which is like two spiraling pyramids. Anyways, it's like a whole thing. We probably don't have time to get so deep into it, but it's like he
Wow.
was literally trying to like ascend the human like biomagnet sphere up rings of consciousness, right? And so I've always been into like just every time I write a song, like I try to infuse it with, it's not always that kind of cosmic transcendent thing, but it's always like healing, or like this album that I'm working on now is it's it's called But There's Beauty in the Fall from Grace. And it's kind of like exploring the like not so beautiful, not so cosmic, not so loving feelings of life, sadness, grief, loss, destruction, like all these things that, we come into this world of contrast, and we have like in our hearts, like we want everything to just be love and harmony all the time, but it's not. It's like we see all these terrible things, but it's like how can we find the beauty in it? Because then that again is like creating love, beauty. You know what I mean? And so it's not like I'm like this album isn't like I'm not finished yet, and there's a big setback with it, but it's like exploring that cosmic feeling and trying to get to love in a different way, where it's more about like healing and going down in the muck and kind of looking at the sadness and looking at the pain and looking at the suffering and feeling it and embodying it and talking about it and singing about it and exploring it in attempts to free from it. You know what I mean? Like
Right. Right.
in making it part of the whole beauty of existence, rather than like seeing it as like antithetical to existence or something.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, back to Welcome to the Garden. Uh there's actually a really crazy story about Welcome to the Garden that it's a little long, but it was very like the whole thing was very cosmic. But I maybe we'll get into it. That'll maybe be for another time, but it's a bit of a long-winded story.
I want to I want to hear it.
Okay, so I'll share it just because I love it so much. But so um, I started writing the songs for Welcome to the Garden in 2018, like 2017, 18. And I was doing a bunch of shows, and I had a really awesome band, and they're all featured on the album. We were doing all these live shows, and it was like this amazing time in my life. And I was feeling like just this like open charge. Like I was very just everything was like aligned, and anything I wanted, I could like manifest it, like nothing. And just all this stuff happened. So I took a saxophone lesson at the Rex, which is a club downtown, with this saxophone player I love who's from LA. His name's Dave Binney. And he was like, we ended up hitting it off and like hanging out the whole day, and just like he we're just chatting about life. And I was like, oh, I love Los Angeles. I love California. I had a cousin that lived there. I was going to visit a bunch, and I just loved the vibe, and I loved just the whole energy of it. And he was like, oh, you could sublet my apartment next month if you want. like in Los Angeles. And I was like, I would love to, but I only have $3,000 to my name, and it's all going towards the studio days that I booked in September, which was the month after. So like 2 months after. Um, this was like July, and then he was offering his apartment for August. My recording dates were in September. And so I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do both, but I was like, you know what? I'm manifesting things like crazy. The universe is moving through me. Like, I'm just going to trust that if this album is supposed to be birthed, the universe will align me up with the funds, because I really want to take this opportunity to go stay in like this hero of mine's apartment in Los Angeles. So I ended up going with my brother. We like sublet this apartment, and we just went to jam sessions every single day, and we met people every single day, and we'd meet someone in a jam session, and then we'd go to their studio, and the whole thing was just us like music, 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 music. Like, how can we make connections, do all this stuff? So I met this guy named Ben who ended up mixing and mastering Welcome to the Garden. And I met him. We like went to his studio. I played flute on this like dance track he remixed, and it was like we just had this fun time. And I played him some of the demos, and was like, "Yeah, I'm going in the studio with this." And he was like, "Oh, I'd love to like mix it." And I was like, "Oh, I would also love for you to mix it." He'd like mixed a bunch of records I loved, and um, but I was like, "But that's like a way later thing." Anyways, so I'm in LA for the whole month. I flew back to Toronto because I had a couple gigs at a jazz festival that I was in Prince Edward County. So I flew back just by myself. My brother stayed for like 5 days, did the gigs, and it made a little money. Flew back. On my flight back to LA for the second half of the trip, my flight was overbooked, and they were like, "Does anyone want to volunteer to go on a later flight for a cash compensation?" And I was like, "Me, like I got nothing really to do in LA, so there's no rush for me to get there." And I ended up getting a $2,400 cash compensation from Air Canada, which paid for my studio time. It was like almost all the money I needed. So that was like, I asked the universe, like, give me the money if it's meant to happen. And literally, like, that's never happened to me again. I never heard of that. Like, I didn't know you got, like, I thought I'd get $200 or something. I didn't know I got over 2 grand. You know what I mean? So I got $2,400 from that. And then this other performance I did, this random man was standing next to my dad watching it, chatting with him. And then when he found out he was my dad, he like gave him $400 cash and was like, give this to her to put towards her music. And so I got all my money back just like from God or whatever. And then, so that's like the first cool part of the story. But then, so when I was in Toronto, I was working for this artist who is named Vanya Vukelik, who she did this design that is on my tattoo. Does these very like mystical, like very feminine, kind of folky visual art stuff. So I worked for her as her personal assistant, where I would once a week just package her prints and take them to the post office and mail them off. And it was just like this kind of like mundane job, but I wanted to work for her because I followed her on Instagram, and I thought she was really just like a very inspiring person and artist and really cool. And then in working for her, I ended up becoming her like cat and house sitter, because she would go to San
Right.
Francisco and spend some time with her partner who's living there. So I would take care of her cat for like a couple weeks, months at a time, a year. And so at one point she was like, uh, "Do you know anybody who could help me with these mystical narratives I want to record? I want to make these like audio soundscapes." And I was like, "I don't know anyone on your level spiritually in Toronto. I'm gonna be perfectly honest. Like, but this guy that I met in Los Angeles, Ben, you should connect with him, especially if you're in California."
Right.
So this is maybe like I recorded September 2019, and then I'm working for Vanya through the fall, doing all these shows, talking to Ben about mixing the album like remotely and stuff. And I'm talking to Vanya, and I'm like, "Yeah, I really want to go to LA to get this guy to mix my record, but I can't really afford the flight." and to pay him. So I'm just like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it with him. And she's like, well, you know what? If you can plan this so that it's in February, I will, because she was moving to San Francisco with her partner. She was like moving there permanently. So she was like, if you can wait till February to go mix this, if you bring my cat to San Francisco first, I'll pay for your whole trip to Los Angeles and back so you can go do your thing with this guy. And I was like, okay, sounds like a deal. So I like went on this adventure. I like took the cat to San Francisco and I like took a bus down the coast and then Ben picked me up in Santa Barbara and we like drove through the mountains. It was like this whole fun thing. That was February 2020. I don't know if you remember what happened in March 2020, just 2 weeks
Yeah,
later. So
yeah.
yeah,
World
so
closed. Yeah.
the world closed up. So right before, like in mid late February, I was like on this crazy adventure driving through California. Me and Ben mixed the record in like 4.5 days of just like working on it straight in Ojai, California, which is this like very spiritual small town in the mountains. And we
Right.
just did this whole thing. It was super fun. The album was like mostly completed by February 2020. And then the world shut down. And then both Ben and Vanya, one's in Northern California, one's in Southern California, split from their partners and became like nomads. And then they connected to work on that mystical narrative thing. And they ended up falling in love and they ended up having a baby and
Whoa.
they all live in Toronto now. And so Welcome to the Garden, like somebody was welcomed to the garden because of Welcome to the Garden. Anyways, I just love that story so much because this kid's like 3.5 years old now, and he's like the
Unreal.
coolest kid ever. And Ben is helping me make my next record. We're like working on it, but he lives in Toronto now, so I don't need to worry about going to California. So the whole thing's like amazing. But the kid's so cool, and I feel like he was like we were all pawns in his scheme to be
Right.
incarnated. Like, but anyway, so I just love that story. So that's like Welcome to the Garden was very divinely orchestrated. I will say I was just like the conduit for all the energy that was trying to like come through. So that's my long story about that.
Unbelievable. Like I did not see that end
So
coming at all.
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my. So there's so much I wanna I don't think we're gonna have enough time.
I know. So
I'm
yeah,
gonna
sorry. I knew that story would be long, but
no, no, not about the story. It's just that you have mentioned a ton of stuff that I want to pick upon, but I do have a 2 o'clock conversation with someone else. But I'm gonna I really want to talk about this album because the opening track is 10 minutes long. The Welcome to the Garden itself. I was very curious about how you get to so when you're blending all of the sounds, psychedelic rock, and you're doing all of this really imaginative stuff. How okay, again, I know that you're just a genius with music, but how do you know what's gonna work when you're blending sounds that are so that appear so different together, but when you do them in the way that you do them with your harmonies in certain places, like how do you know that that's gonna work when you're doing that this kind of thing that you do?
yeah, I feel like I don't think about it because again, I don't really think in genres. Like I love psychedelic rock. Like I'll show you. I'll just angle my camera. This is my vinyl collection from when I was in middle school of almost exclusively psychedelic rock records that are formative inside of me because I've listened to them so much. Jazz is formative to me because I spent thousands of hours transcribing John Coltrane and studying jazz and practicing it. Like all these things are just who I am, right? So I'm not really
Right.
thinking of it as like, how can I blend psych rock and jazz? I'm just like, they are blended inside of me already because I've
Huh.
consumed so much of it. So I'm just thinking of like when I was writing Welcome to the Garden, I was thinking, how do I say what I want to say about Mother Earth and the divine feminine? And so I wanted to make it kind of epic because I wanted it to have this kind of like power of the earth and this like grandiosity of like feeling the core of the earth and stuff. And and I wanted to make it kind of trippy. Like I wanted to make it kind of like psychedelic and kind of like spooky or something. But
Right.
I wasn't necessarily thinking like how can I take this and this and like blend them together. I was just like thinking in terms of like the story I was trying to tell, and that's how it happened to come out because those are the things that are so influential to me and so like deeply woven into just like my own voice. So I can't really take the psych rock influence out. I can't take the jazz influence out, even if I tried. I don't think like even when I sometimes when I'm like harmonizing with people, they're like, "Oh, you picked such a jazzy harmony note," and I'm like, I was just trying to make something that sounded pretty. I didn't even really think about like that it would be like any kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah, for sure. And
yeah.
you could also hear folk in there as well. There's certain songs. I'll tell you what my favorite song is on the album is "Back to Earth." I've fallen in love with it. It's like it's just on constant rotation. I'm playing it and playing it. So just because I'm biased towards that one, I want you to tell me the origins of that particular track and how that process went.
Yeah, that one I wrote it at the piano. The chorus came to me really clearly. That just like popped out while I was playing and a lot of the times when a really clear melody comes out, it comes out like with the words already, like or
Right.
some of the words and I just like piece it together. But it's actually funny you say that because that song almost didn't make it to the record in my like post production insecurity and self-consciousness. I was like, this sounds too musical theater. This sounds too corny. Like, I also love musical theater. I was in my high school jazz choir for 4 years, you know, like we did. That's like a whole part of me too. And so, but I felt very self-conscious that it was so corny because if you play that next to Welcome to the Garden, like I was like, oh, Welcome to the Garden's cool. And then this is like corny and lame and embarrassing. But that's the song everybody says is their favorite. And that's the song that everybody's like, it's like the one that stuck out. And the fourth or fifth time I listened to it, I really got it. Like, it's like, so there was clearly something in there that people
Right.
needed. And like,
Right.
and
Right.
it was actually funny. Another song that I almost didn't have on the record is Courage, My Love, but I wrote it
Right.
later, and that's why it's the only one not recorded with a full band because I wrote it after I'd already done the recording session as a response to myself not having the courage to express myself and in the
I
process.
see.
So it was kind of like this little bow at the end of the album of like I kind of made this weird indie record that is kind of I don't know if people will like it. I don't know if nobody really does anything like this. So I don't know if it's legit or not, but oh, I'm so self conscious. I'm so scared people will think I'm weird and corny, but whatever. Just have courage, Emily. Just put it out. Life's short. Who cares? It's just music. Like, and so that was like kind of my little antidote to that song at the end. So yeah, but that's I love that. I love that it back to earth. It's the one that the unsung hero apparently. Yeah. So or the song hero.
There's a certain philosophy you hold. I just want to find where recognition for your work fits into that whole landscape of you doing what you do. I know that you're gonna do it regardless, but where does recognition for for just your the level of artistry you bring to music? Where does that fit into how you see this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I appreciate it. Like that one I was very pleasantly surprised about because it was like a voted thing. So something I've realized with my music is I don't have very high streaming numbers, but the
Right.
people that listen to but I have a lot of DMs from random people that are like this long being like, your music like awoken something in me and I've cried all day listening. Like the people that like it like hits very deep, which I think speaks to the depth and like personal vulnerability that I try to put in it, that I just like naturally put in it because that's just who I am as a person. But I try not to think too much about recognition and like things like that. Like I I don't know. Like I'm a human being. When I was in college, I was like chasing all the scholarships and all the gold stars. And in high school, I was always top of my class and stuff. So I have that kind of like Capricorn goody two shoes. Like I want the gold star in me, but I feel like I'm always trying to challenge it and always trying to be like, it's nice. I appreciate it. It's of course feels good to be recognized. It felt really good to get the
Right.
$10,000 from that award. Like there was some, but but I try as much as possible not to focus on it, not to make it like really. It's just like that's why I didn't send you a bio too, because I just wanted you to hear the music and then ask me questions
Right.
based on the music. Like I want the music to speak for itself, and then if there's organizations or whatever that want to like put labels and the words on things, so be it. I understand that that's kind of necessary in the industry, but I'm trying to not really concern myself with the industry. I'm trying to just concern myself with the art and the music itself and like what the music's trying to say as a human, not as an industry. You know what I mean? Like we are two
Right.
people. You have a heart, I have a heart, you have a soul, I have a soul. So music and language can like be like we can both experience it and it's beautiful to talk about that. And then any like labels and stuff like that. Now we're not talking about our hearts and souls anymore. We're talking about accolades and like structures and society and money and this and that. So I like to keep it as much as possible just to the very human elements. And I don't think the words and all that are much like they're not like, but it always feels good to get recognition, I guess. I'm not gonna lie and say it doesn't feel good, but
Okay. Like there's so much I want to talk about. Okay, so maybe this is opposite of what we're trying to do here, but the body of work itself. When I listen to that, just like you've said, I think it aligns with the DMs that you've received. There's just this otherworldly type of vibe to it, and it puts you in a really, for me, I find in a really peaceful place from the lyric to the music to the composition itself. But as a message to the industry, what would you say this body of work is trying to do? To do what gap is it trying to cover here? Because it does take courage, just like you've said.
that like I struggle the most. I don't struggle with my love for music and my desire to be a musician in the sense that I want to play instruments and write songs. I'm going to do that regardless of whether anybody ever knew who I was or whatever. But I really am challenged by trying to market and talk about my music like after the fact and and even just thinking like I don't really know where it fits in, and I get all messed up in my head trying to figure it out because I get self conscious and I don't have like working on my self esteem. Like I'm not like one of those artists that's just like so confident in themselves. I don't want to be on a billboard. That seems way scary. Like I don't, you know what I mean? Like I'm not like trying to get everybody to know who I am. I just want to make music I think is really cool because I like listening to music that I think is really cool. So it's like I actually like I don't even know. I don't know like what. I'm just trying to make cool music and I'm like when I was a backup singer, I played at Madison Square Garden and it was not even 1% as fun as when I play for 20 people who I can talk to them all after and they all are
Right.
listening and really connecting with the music. Like I am just trying to make art and connect to other humans. That's like really and if once I start thinking about the industry and where I fit in and how I put myself I just get stressed out and it makes me want to quit music. So
Okay.
I try not to even think about that stuff because it just boggles my mind and it freaks me out. There's so much icky stuff about it. Like I don't like Spotify and I don't like all this stuff. Like I find so much of it so like off-putting. Like most of the music I listen to is from like the 60s and 70s because it's like
Right.
kind of in
Right.
this time before musicians were celebrities. They were just musicians and like the whole thing was like
Right.
about the record you bought. There wasn't like magazines and billboards and Instagram and you know what I mean? Like that kind of built like with MTV, like pre MTV music, sign me up. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I hear
and
you.
it's just about how it sounds and feels and the message of it, right? Because then you can also, that kind of ethereal quality spirituality, like it's easier to tap into when you have less energy expended in the 3D form. You know what I mean? Like if I'm so concerned about my
Uh-huh.
image and presentation, like we're so worried about it, then you see my music presented, you're thinking about it, where is it placed in culture? We're not tapping into the grand cosmic timelessness of it all. You know what I mean? We're tapping into trends and culture and this and that. I'm not trying to tap into that. I'm trying to access timelessness. I'm trying to make music that's timeless, that doesn't have a spot into the current industry. It has a spot in humanity. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's my
Okay.
that would be my response to that. But it's a lot of it's just insecurity. It's just like I didn't study like pop culture. I studied jazz saxophone, so I don't know how to do that.
No, there's so much to your story. It's just incredible. So again, just like I said, I love your energy. I think it's just I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, but I don't think I have talking to you to I've spoken to you to the extent that I want to do it. So I'm gonna reach out again, and we're gonna set a time. I want to hear a lot more about the album that you're working on right now. There are thoughts I have here in terms of just your philosophy about getting in the muck of life and trying to that is one way through which we get to love, right? The sadness and all of that, that it goes hand in hand. You have daylight and you have darkness, and one is not necessarily better than the other, that they coexist.
Yeah.
And those kind of, I'm very aligned with that. But I just want to say congratulations for the album itself. We're gonna edit this, of course, and put it up. But it's been such a fun conversation to talk to you and get to know you.
Yeah, thanks so
Really
much for
excited
setting
that
this
I
up.
reached that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
I
for
had a
sure, for
blast too.
sure.
Thanks for asking cool questions and listening to music and making this at all, like giving a platform to artists to even talk about this kind of stuff is really cool. It makes me feel inspired and makes me want to go make more art and stuff. So thanks for creating this.
Thank you so much, Emily.